Example 9 says the simple interest charged on a 6-month loan of $3,000 is $150. Find the simple interest rate. Let's read that again. We don't want to jump too fast into this problem. It says the simple interest charged on a 6-month loan of $3,000 is $150. Find the simple interest rate. Okay. So 6 months here is our time. Notice this is the time in months. So when we say we want to find the simple interest rate, remember we are now finding for R, and we have to assume this is annual. It said always assume your rate is annual. So that means our time needs to be annual. To make 6 months annual, you'd have to say time is, well, months, there are 12 months in a year. So T is 6 months, or 6/12 of a year. Our initial investment around here is P, the $3,000, and it's telling you the $150 is I. Notice that's a dollar amount. That's not your interest rate. That's your interest dollar amount. So we have something different going on here. We're not solving for I. We're actually solving for R. Does that change which formula we use? Well, no, it doesn't. We're still going to use I equals PRT. We can still plug in the things that we know. We know I is 150. We know P is 3,000. R we don't know, so I'll leave it as an R. And then T we know is 6/12. So now I need to solve for R. I need to isolate R. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to clean up the right side. So I'm going to multiply 3,000 times 6/12. Multiply the 3,000 times 6/12 in your calculator, or 3,000 times 1/2 if you simplified it. And when I do that, I end up with 150 equals 3,000 times 6/12 would be 1,500. So 1,500 R. Isolating R, because it's multiplied, I need to do the opposite. So I need to divide by 1,500 on both sides. And I end up with step 4. So we had a little bit of math we had to do on our own there. I end up with R equal to 0.1. 0.1. Okay? However, remember this is a decimal. And anytime we want to write a final answer, when we're talking about rates, it has to be written as a percentage. So we can't put 0.1 there. That's the decimal version of it. We actually need the percentage version of it. So how do you go from a decimal to a percentage? Well, instead of moving the decimal 2 to the left, you move it 2 to the right. Instead of dividing by 10, you would multiply by 10. Or you could just do 0.1 and you can convert it to a percentage in your calculator using the second and then the right parentheses button would convert it to a percentage. But this turns into 10%. So again, move the decimal to the right 2, multiply times 100, or use that second braces on your calculator, the right brace, to convert it to a percentage. And 10% is the annual interest rate of interest that you would receive. Okay? If you used T equals 6 instead of 6/12 in that problem, you would have been giving me the monthly interest rate. And again, we must assume if it's not stated, you always want annual or have annual interest rates. So be very careful, make sure you use T as 6/12 in that problem. Let's look at example 10. It says the simple interest charged on a 6-month loan of $12,000 is $462. Find the simple interest rate. So again, they want the rate, R, and we have to assume that is annual. T is 6 months here, but we have to make this annual because R and T have to match. So I'm going to say T is 6/12 because 6 months is 6/12 of a year. The $12,000 is our initial investment, and the $462 is the dollar amount of interest. Again, that's step 1. Step 2, again, no different. Write down that formula. We know that I equals PRT. Step 3, plug in what you know. I know the interest is $462. I know that our initial principal was $12,000. I know the rate is R. I actually don't know the rate. And I know the time in years is 6/12. Again, it has to be in terms of years. I'm going to clean it up by cleaning the right-hand side up by multiplying 12,000 times 6/12. When I do that, I end up with 462 equals, well, 12,000 times 6/12 is 6,000. We still have the R. I'm going to divide both sides by 6,000. Again, this is going to give me a fraction or a decimal. If it gives you a fraction, just hit that double arrow button above enter on your calculator, converts it to a decimal. But I'm getting approximately 0.077, which I want to, that's the decimal version of it. I want to write the percentage as the answer. You must write all rates as percentages. So the percentage answer, moving that decimal to the right 2, would be 7.7%. Okay, so far we've talked about interest and rates, but what we haven't talked about is what's the total amount in the account. Okay, so let's read through this. It says, when you borrow money, the total amount to be repaid to the lender is the sum of the principal and the interest. So for instance, if you have a $1,000 loan and you owe $500 in interest, you would owe them $1,500. How did I get that? I took the amount that I owed, the amount that was interest, added them together, and that's the total amount. Likewise, if I had a $1,000 investment and I earned $500 in interest, then how much would I have in my account? I would have $1,500. The principal, the initial investment, plus that interest. So that's what they're getting this formula right here for them, is A equals P plus I, which we will see again in a later section. So here again, A is going to be the, what I call the, it's called the future amount. A I like to call the new amount, or the new total, because P I always think of the initial amount, the original amount. So A is how much is in the account now, or how much will be in the account in the future. Okay, P is always the initial investment, A is always the new investment. Okay, notice A, if it's an investment, A should be always higher than P. The new amount should be the original amount with interest added on. So A should always be higher than P. A is the bigger one. Okay. So it says this formula can be used for loans or investments. When used for a loan, A is the total amount to be repaid to the lender. This sum is called the maturity value. So the only difference between these words right here where it says maturity formula and future value, maturity just means it's a loan. Future just means that it's an investment. Again, future value is an investment. Maturity value means it's a loan. It's the exact same formula calculated the exact same way. It's just a different name if it's a loan versus an investment. It says, in a previous example, the simple interest charged on the loan of $3,000 was $150. The maturity value of the loan is therefore $3,000 plus $150, or $3,150. In other words, you have to pay your initial loan amount, the $3,000, plus you have to pay that interest, that fee, the $150. For an investment, such as a deposit in a bank savings account, A is the total amount of deposit after the interest has been earned and has been added to the principal. This sum is called the future value. Again, maturity value, when you see maturity value, that just means it's a loan. When you see future value, that just means it's an investment. Okay? So, what I want you to realize, though, is remember that I equals PRT. That's something we know. So if I look at this formula, A equals P plus I, but instead of I write PRT, what we end up with is A equals P plus PRT. I don't know if you remember how to factor, but if you factor the P out of both of these terms, in other words, divide both of these terms by P divided by P is 1, and PRT divided by P is just RT. So here is the factored version of it. And this is the formula that I use all the time. To calculate the future value or maturity value, the total amount, not just the interest, the total amount in the account, or the total amount owned, I'm going to use A equals P times 1 plus RT. So there's two ways we could do each one of these problems. We could first calculate interest using I equals PRT, and then add that to the principal. So that's 2 steps, calculate interest and then add it to the principal. Or you could just straightforward use this last formula. A equals P times 1 plus RT. You can find the total amount in 1 step. So totally up to you how you want to do it. Calculate the interest and then add it to the principal, 2 steps, or just use this formula, 1 step. I'm going to use this formula. I like trying to do as little work as possible.